allowed to cuss, right?
Yeah, let her rip.
Like,
Yeah.
nobody gives a shit anymore. Like, nobody gives a shit. And, the optics of like not having that esteemed college thing maybe aren't as important anymore. I mean, I've said this is like my tagline. I can't even tell you how many times I've said this, but like, I have sold more buildings to people with dirty fingernails and than I have to people who wear suits. And you would never ever know that, whether it's a car repair guy or a guy who owns a plumbing company or an electric.
Real Estate Reserve podcast. I'm Jason Balin from Hard Money Bankers with Ian Horowitz from Equity Warehouse. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I promise we're going to have a whole lot of fun. You might even learn something about real estate investing or business. If this is your multiple second time, 100th time, we've probably done 100, what are these, 90 episodes again? 190
episodes. 200.
Tuning in. Welcome back. We certainly appreciate it. We love this. We love the support. We couldn't do it without you guys, so we certainly appreciate that. We try to bring in local guests that are experts in the local market to help our real estate community grow. And all I was told about Kate, who we're going to interview here in a second from Ian, is that she's a lot of fun and likes to talk. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, well, it's good because she is very experienced in the market. She understands the commercial side of things, and more importantly, has been helping us on a few of our projects and has absolutely crushed it, her and her team. But before we do that, guys, if you get any value out of this show, let's get this out of the way now. We don't have sponsors. We don't do any of that other stuff. We do it because we like doing these and we like sharing these experiences. Same phone conversation we would have with Kate, whether you guys were here or not. So if you get any value, please subscribe, share it. That's the best compliment that you can give us. Now, let's just hop right into it. It's 2024. It's time to jump right in. So I want to bring Kate Jordan from Lee Associates in. She's our commercial leasing broker over on our Gaslight Square project. She's done a few other projects for us. And Kate, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I was just realizing that I don't have a baseball hat on, so I'm like waving my hands to everyone in the office to get me a baseball hat, but there isn't one. So I wish I had gotten that memo. My name is Kate Jordan. I am one of the principals at Lee Associates, which is the country's largest broker-owned commercial real estate firm. We have over 70 offices across the United States. I helped start the Maryland office in 2013, so we've been open for about 10 years. I'm also the president of NAIOP Maryland, NAIOP, which is a pretty substantial commercial real estate group that's made up of developers, leasing agents, all different kinds of people involved in the business. So I just took over that role. Yesterday was my first meeting. And then I'm the past president of SIOR, Maryland, DC, and Northern Virginia. So I'm really busy, but I'm loving leasing Gaslight because it's near and dear to my heart because I live almost in walking distance to it. So it's been a really fun personal project for me to work on as kind of a pet project.
Yeah, no, I would say that's definitely a good thing because, as you know, we interviewed a few other brokers that just aren't as tied to the community. And it's been a different experience. Everyone in the area, and it's been fun. And we'll get into that in a second. But you and Marley, you guys, I presume, are a team, I guess is the best way to say it. I mean, there's not many female commercial brokers out there in the game, right? Because we've honestly had it on our podcast where someone said to us, hey, like, why don't you interview more female real estate people? I'm like, well, I only know a few. And I said, I got to have Kate on. But like, how'd you end up in the commercial world? And you are one of only a few females in the commercial broker space locally to us.
It was completely dumb luck. When I was in high school, my dad passed away. And so I spent a lot of time spending the weekend at one of my best friend's houses because I lived in Bel Air and I went to Roland Park Country School. So it was a pretty substantial commute. And my friend Lauren's dad was amazing. He is amazing. He would make it to all of our sporting events. He would cook me banana pancakes on Sunday mornings. Like, he's just like the best of the best of the best dad. And after a couple of years of working for one of my youngest uncles in the insurance business, I was ready to kind of do something different. And I mentioned to Lauren, like, hey, commercial real estate sounds cool. I'm thinking about trying to get into it. And she was like, oh, you should talk to my dad. And I'm like, why? And it turns out that Bill Miller was had he been at KLNB 1 week earlier, it would have been KLNBM. He was one of the originals. And I think if you ask most people, he is like the gold standard. He's an office broker, more in the Towson market. But something clicked to me that here's this person who I love so much. And he was there for me in every way you could possibly be there for a kid. And I never knew what he did for a living because he didn't sit around talking about work at home. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the mom that was at the sporting events or the dance recital or whatever, sitting around talking about my job all the time. Because anyway, so I was like, hook, line, and sinker, let's do this. And so I asked Bill, who I call Mr. Miller personally and Bill professionally, if he would have coffee with me. So we went to the Towson Diner, and he was just like, Kate, this is a terrible idea. I love you. I have seen what happens to the women in this business. It's a really hard road, and I don't want that for you. I'll always support whatever you want, but I would hate to think of you having to, push this massive boulder up the hill. Like, anyway, so I sort of let that be. And through a number of different personal connections, I ended up getting a job at his company with a completely different broker. And I didn't tell him. And he called me and he's like, what are you doing? Why didn't you call me first? And I was like, I just didn't want it to be about that because I cared about that relationship so much. So, I mean, truly, it was as much dumb luck as I had a friend who was in the business who happened to be in a box at a Ravens game for a client event, who spoke to my partner, Alan, who I've worked with from day one, who saw that there was that gap in the market, that, there weren't a lot of women, and he was looking to hire a female to add to his 3-person team. And that's how I ended up where I was. It's challenging. Alan has been such a great supporter for me, and he's been in the business for such a long time that I think nobody ever really messed with me because there's a level of respect for him in the business, and it's a small market. And so I wish I wish I had all these terrible stories of awful things that have happened to me. But the reality is, I do think that women are really well suited for this role. We are natural multitaskers. I mean, being a mom and being a wife and being a commercial real estate agent is like directing air traffic control at all hours of the day. And we're just built to do that. So to me, it's always been a benefit, not a negative. But I do think that that's because I always had a really strong male partner who was looking out for me and had my back. And I also, have carried myself in a certain way that, I just try to be as reputable as possible and as honest and work really hard. So that's a really long-winded way of answering it. But, Marley, who's my partner and has been my partner since we came to Lee in 2013, has that, captain of the Rutgers lacrosse team, athlete background. Not to say I wasn't an athlete, but I was not captain of the Rutgers lacrosse team. So Alan had known her for a long time because her dad was a golf pro at, I now know you're supposed to say professional, at the golf course that he grew up playing at. And so it was, that typical Baltimore stuff of right place, right time. But she worked her butt off and she crushed it. She actually just made partner this year. So we're so proud of her. And we had been looking for a long time to hire someone else for our team. And it's really hard to find good people. And we had Samantha as our marketing intern, probably 8 years ago. And she was in college, and again, college athlete, lacrosse player at Furman, just awesome person. And we loved her. We tried to get her to come into the business, but she wasn't interested after the internship. She wanted to do something different, but we stayed in contact, and she never burned a bridge. She was great. And Marley and I were like, can we have 3 women on this team? You hate to have that conversation, but it is a conversation you have to have of like, you are trying to market yourself, and can 3 women walk into the room and be taken seriously in this often male dominated industry? And after we interviewed all these other people, we went to Sam and we were like, you got to quit your job and come work for us. I know you're not looking, but you're the one. We want you. And she was like, is it working for the 2 of you? And we said, yeah. And she said, fine, I'll do it. So she's a really stand-up person. She loved her other job. She had some commitments she needed to fulfill there. So we had to wait a couple months for her to finish up some projects she was working on. But again, it goes back to Bill and relationships and never burning bridges and doing things right the first time. And we knew that Sam was worth waiting for, even though we really needed the help. And she's crushing it. I mean, she's only been
Yeah.
working with us since May, and she's already done a bunch of tenant rep assignments on her own, and she's managing up, which is huge. You know, I think most brokers have a certain amount of ADD that's sort of innate to make them good at this job, and we needed someone to help us get some structure and manage up, and Sam's been that person.
Yep.
So we're just so lucky we have her. And
Yeah, no, I mean, those are all good points. And I think every good like team needs that one person that keeps it together. I mean, you know,
Yep.
Ryan keeps it together for us.
Yeah.
Jason's got Terry in his office that keeps it together for them. You know, and I think it's also interesting that your sister company, we had Stacy on here a few weeks ago. You know, their office is all females, and that they, you know, very organized and very like regimented processes. You know, I'm sure some of that's from the female background, which is, you know, just a touch that we don't get sometimes. But I think some of it's like you reference the athletics a lot, and like recruiting people with athletics and, you know, high like sports type backgrounds. I mean, you know, is that something that you see a lot in business owners when you're dealing them with commercial leasing, or it just happens to be the sphere of influence that you've run into in hiring people?
You know, it's funny. Lee Associates puts on an amazing conference every year out in Las Vegas, and we try to get as many people as we can to come. And I was there. I've been to most of them since we've been here. And last year there was actually a female broker panel, and the women that they selected were all absolutely wonderful and just could not have picked better people. And there were a lot of women in the audience, but there were also a lot of men in the audience, and that was because they want women on their teams and they cared enough to come to that portion of the event as opposed to some other options that were offered at that time, which I love to see. And that was a question that was asked, was how do we get more women on our team? And it was interesting. I think there were 4 panelists and all 4 said, start looking for women athletes. And then it was interesting in the crowd, how many of the women piped up and said, oh, I play basketball. You know, there were a substantial amount of people in the audience who were brokers at Lee who are female that did play Division I or some type of college sport.
Yeah,
Well,
Jason, I'm reminded of your mastermind clients out of South Carolina, the high level basketball players. Like they absolutely crush it. Yeah,
and their entire organization, and I mean, not that they're a gigantic company, but they've got 15, you know, dozen or so employees, and they're all females, and they're all very similar to them, which kind of leads me to what, you know, I was thinking about as you were talking, that I think most people in general, not that they necessarily hire folks exactly like them, but a lot of people like to keep it in the family, right? They hire, you know, as long as if they're well suited, but they hire their friends, they hire folks like them, family members, friends of a friend, which, you know, nothing wrong with, right? If that particularly works. And I think, you know, some industries and some businesses, hey, they might all be predominantly men, or they might all be predominantly women, or they might all be predominantly this, because that's just their sphere of influence that in essence is kind of growing with them. You know, inside our operation, you know, with, you know, the 10 employees that we have actually a good mix of half men and half women, but we never, you know, when we, our first line when we were hiring was never like, hey, let's just throw something on Craigslist or do this. It's like, let's see who we know, right? Let's figure out exactly who we know. We can use channels like Facebook and other platforms first. And then after that, it was, let's blast out our email list, because I'm sure we have followers or people that already potentially like us that potentially can want to work for a company. So when you're talking about it was a lot of female athletes, I think that's just the sphere, right? That a lot of people have something in common to do so. And people want to do, I think, what other people are doing and or how they see other people successful. And I think, and again, I have no idea why this business maybe was predominantly men in the past. I don't know the answer to that, but I guess maybe it was, hey, this worked for so-and-so, and they just continued, you know, different brokerages, different companies continue to hire their peers. And that's just how that turns out, I suppose.
Well, I do think you're going to get a higher hit ratio on these athletes because, look, if my daughter wants to play sports in college, I am fully prepared to pay for her to go to school if she wants to. Playing a sport in college is a full-time job, and that is your number one priority. And so I think it does bring on kind of an early level of commitment that maybe a lot of college students are not accustomed to, and that accountability and being, a self-starter type. Like there's certain things that college athletes have. Like, it's funny, I'm thinking about it in our office. Okay, so Marley's lacrosse at Rutgers, Sam's lacrosse at Furman. Ben was the captain of the football team at Trinity. Eric was on the Delaware football team, and Gideon also played football briefly in college as well. So of all of our young people in the office, they all did play college level sports for at least a portion of the time they were there. And I just, not to make gross generalizations about the younger people out there these days, but one thing I think we saw through COVID, which I've seen through a bunch of my younger cousins, is, these kids did not have the luxury of going off to college and basically having 4 years of having fun, making sure that they got enough work done that they could eke through and not have their parents be all over them. These kids either, they either did it or they didn't do it. And they saw that, maybe they had to sit in their parents' basement for a year and things like that. They all kind of were like, college is sort of one of those things that maybe wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And so a lot of them came out with this sort of early sense of urgency that I've never seen before, where they were kind of like, let's just go. Let's do it. I want to make some money. I want to do some cool stuff. I need money to do some cool stuff. I can't be an Instagram influencer for my whole life. So I'm going to pick this job that gives me a huge amount of flexibility. And, however hard I work, I'm going to make that amount of money. And so, and anyway, I went down a major wormhole there, but I just feel like these kids are awesome. Like I am terrified about where our world is going right now, but that generation of kids that just came out of school during that sort of COVID period, I am so optimistic about, because these kids are awesome. They're just doing great things. They're super creative. They're outside the box. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be some slackers out there, but the young people in our office excite me so much. They are really hardworking, and it's fun to learn from them.
Yeah, I wish I could say something about my young guy in my office as he's cranking away on the computer. No, but seriously, like Jason and I were messing with Sean earlier today, talking about you went to school for marketing. Did you really need to go to school for marketing? He's like, no, not really. I learned a lot of stuff on YouTube, and I learned a lot of stuff in these other classes. And it's like, I just think there's so much information out there that, like, side by side with I'm not a college guy by any means, but if you went to college and you got the education or the life experiences that you needed side by side without all the other content that's out there, you can learn. I mean, I'm a dumb fireman, and I learned how to invest in real estate mostly through just following what other people were doing. And the information is so prevalent out there to make you successful nowadays. And there's no excuse, honestly.
Well, and also, we can go down this road if we all want to, because it's definitely an interesting topic.
We're supposed to be talking about commercial.
Yeah, but you use the firehouse and being a firefighter towards the same years as a lot of people went to college, and obviously you extended that, but there's still that level of maturity that 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds don't have.
Right.
I'm not saying they all don't
like
have
literally
it.
life and death, and death.
Yeah, and I've heard folks being like, well, go travel. It's like, if you're 17 or 18-year-old, I'm not saying like you can't do that, but like, I couldn't do that. Where the hell am I going to travel? Where's the money coming from? And what am I going to do? Like, I can't, I grew up in Montgomery County. I didn't even know where Howard County was, or Frederick County or Baltimore County or any of those things, because you didn't know. Not that you didn't go there, but you didn't necessarily do that with, yourself. And I mean, I went to college, a few hours north of Montgomery County, and I learned, the areas between that, driving back and forth. So I think as an 18-year-old, it's you just don't have that maturity level. Some people obviously do, but I think the majority of them don't. And then that's good to hear. Actually, great to hear, Kate, that like these kids, and I know you're using the term kids, and they're not really kids, but they graduate college.
They feel like kids.
Yeah, they're kids to us. At 20, they come out at 22 years old, and they're motivated and they're hungry. And if that's the experience that they got out of college, we win, right? Like society wins if that's truly the case. And again, I'm not saying that's gonna happen to everybody, but that's, I think, the goal. And and not that Ian and I we differ on this a little bit, but we don't necessarily argue about this topic, college versus not college, because I do think